Hello, I'm Dr. Octavia Cox and welcome to my channel where I do all things classic literature. In this video today, I'm going to be looking at a literary technique that is particularly utilised by Jane Austen. It's a technique that she is incredibly adept at, I think, and that is ZEUGMA. So I'm going to provide some examples and analysis of Jane Austen's ZEUGMA jokes from Pride and Prejudice, Northanger Abbey and Sense and Sensibility. And I'm going to suggest the effects of these ZEUGMA jokes, so what the zeugmatic construction achieves. So I hope that this video will be both fun and interesting. Who doesn't love a good joke, especially a very tightly constructed one? First things first, we need to ask ourselves, what is ZEUGMA? ZEUGMA derives from the Greek for yoking. ZEUGMA is where two or more words are yoked together to being governed by a separate other word. It's usually a verb, but not always. So the Oxford Dictionary of Literary Terms defines ZEUGMA as a figure of speech by which one word refers to two others in the same sentence. I would add at least two others. A figure of speech by which one word refers to two, at least, others in the same sentence. A very typical example of ZEUGMA is from Alexander Pope's poem The Rape of the Lock, the 5-canto version of which was published in 1714. And this use of ZEUGMA is Pope describing Queen Anne and her governance at Hampton Court Palace. And the couplet reads, "Here, so at Hampton Court Palace, thou, Queen Anne, great Anna, whom 3 realms obey, dost sometimes counsel take, and sometimes tea." So Alexander Pope's ZEUGMA here applies to the verb take, which governs both counsel and tea. So the words counsel and tea are yoked together through the word take. Anne takes counsel and Anne takes tea. And what this yoking together does, what this ZEUGMA does, is it puts the two things in direct comparison with one another. Taking counsel from her statesman, so something serious, you would hope, is aligned with something as trivial, as ordinary, as everyday, as mundane as taking tea. The zeugmatic joke then asks readers to think about how seriously or trivially Anne takes both, or either. So how does Jane Austen use this very Popian, very mock-epic literary technique of ZEUGMA in her novels? I'm going to look first at Pride and Prejudice and start with a classic example. So when Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy are walking in front of Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner in the grounds at Pemberley, Elizabeth is struggling to know what to say. And the text reads, "Yet time and her aunt moved slowly, and her patience and her ideas were nearly worn out before the tete-a-tete was over." And there's double ZEUGMA here. As if one was not enough, we've got double here. The moving of time and Mrs. Gardiner, both of those are slow. And because of the slow moving of her aunt and time, Lizzie Bennet has almost worn out both her patience and her ideas for conversational topics. So the two uses of ZEUGMA here are the moved slowly, which governs both time and her aunt, and the worn out, which governs both her patience and her ideas. And as an additional point here in terms of analysing Jane Austen's beautiful construction, how highly wrought her texts are, I think the extended hyphen here grammatically links Lizzie's slow-moving aunt and her patience, creating a chiastic, a mirroring way of reading the sentence. So chiasmus comes from the Greek for crossing over. So a chiastic structure is one like that, which is sort of A, B, B, A, where the middle bits relate to each other and the end bits relate to each other, either in a sentence or in a line of poetry. It's a very, also, like zeugma, it's also a very Popian construction form. So here, the B, so the middle part, which is literally linked with the hyphen. The B part is her aunt moving slowly, wearing out her patience, and the A part, so the outer side, the slow moving of time, wearing out her ideas. Another example from Pride and Prejudice, which I think is more deliberately provocative for readers, asking them to think more about what is being yoked together and why it's being yoked together, is used to describe the thinking of Lady Lucas about her daughter, Charlotte Lucas, who is now Mrs. Collins. So the text reads, Lady Lucas was inquiring of Maria. Maria is another daughter, sister of Charlotte. Lady Lucas was inquiring of Maria after the welfare and poultry of her eldest daughter. So the zeugma here is that Lady Lucas is inquiring after Charlotte's welfare and Charlotte's poultry. So her chickens, her geese, her ducks, her kind of domestic birds that she keeps for eggs and for eating. So Lady Lucas elides the serious, so Charlotte's welfare, surely the greatest concern of any parent, the welfare of their children, and especially for Charlotte at this time, given her new situation in life as the wife of Mr. Collins, in a new house, in another part of the country, surrounded by new people. And Lady Lucas has not visited Charlotte in her new house yet, so she's getting all her information from Maria. So you would hope that this would be serious, Lady Lucas asking about her daughter's welfare with all these great big changes that have happened to her. But Lady Lucas seems to elide the serious, so Charlotte's welfare, and the more trivial, so her poultry situation. On a more sort of profound level, what Jane Austen's use of zeugma here might encourage is for the reader to consider how much of a woman's welfare in this period relied on her mundane, you might say trivial, domestic concerns. It's funny, but it's also rather tragic, I think, that Lady Lucas seems to consider the two to be equivalents, to be relational. And Jane Austen achieves this through having Lady Lucas think, or representing Lady Lucas's thinking to us readers, through zeugma. I'm now going to consider two examples from Northanger Abbey. So at the end of the very opening chapter, chapter 1, where the Allens propose taking Catherine Morland to Bath with them, the text reads, Mr. and Mrs. Morland were all compliance, and Catherine all happiness. And what this does at the end of the first chapter is prefigure the idea that yoking together comparisons is going to play an important part in the rest of the novel that follows, because what Catherine Morland almost constantly does in the novel is try to navigate the world, Bath and Northanger, by comparing reality with fiction, Gothic novels in particular. There is a confusion of analogies in Catherine Morland's mind throughout the novel. Jane Austen represents Catherine's confusion of analogies in Northanger Abbey through a rhetoric of comparison, or drawing of likenesses between disparate things. And this is beautifully encapsulated, I think, in the zeugma and alliteration of the narrative voice's description of Catherine Morland's thinking in this quotation. So this quotation I'm about to unpick a bit more is when Catherine Morland is in Bath and she has been forced on a carriage ride with John Thorpe, having been convinced that the Tilneys have stood her up for their proposed walk. So the text reads, "She meditated by turns on broken promises and broken arches, phaetons and false hangings, Tilneys and trapdoors." This is such a wonderfully constructed, tightly wrought sentence where Catherine is meditating by turns on reality and the Gothic, on reality and fiction. So in terms of the sentence's balance, so first in each comparison is the reality or the real world. So the broken promises, phaetons and Tilneys. These are all linked together, these parts of the real world. Phaetons because Catherine has been told by the Thorpes that the Tilneys have gone for a carriage ride in their phaeton, which is a type of carriage, thus breaking their promise to go on a walk with her. So the first then is the reality or the real world's part, and in the second part of each comparison is the Gothic imagery, the fictional imagery. So the broken arches, the false hangings and the trap doors. So emphasising in this triplicate that Catherine's mind is constantly veering between fiction and reality. I mean, literally we've got reality fiction, reality fiction, reality fiction 3 times in one sentence. She bounces between those. So Jane Austen also uses alliteration to kind of enhance the comic element, but also to draw comparisons, better to draw comparisons. So we've got the B sound of the broken promises and broken arches, the F sound of phaetons and false hangings, and the T sound of Tilneys and trap doors. The zeugma is highlighted in the repetition of the word broken. Catherine meditated on broken promises and broken arches. Figuratively, then, in this zeugma, she meditates on both sort of fiction and reality equally. And furthermore, a broken promise is a figurative break, and a broken arch is a physical break. In a ruined, crumbling Gothic castle, for example, you might have a broken, crumbling arch. There is an ironic reversal then of the real world described using figurative language, so broken promises in the real world, and the fictional world, so the world of ruined castles, described using physical imagery, so broken arches. All of which shows the jumble that's kind of going on in Catherine's imagination at this moment. My final example is from Sense and Sensibility. In the very final chapter of the novel, we are told of the happy couple, Eleanor and Edward Ferrars, that they had in fact nothing to wish for but the marriage of Colonel Brandon and Marianne, and rather better pasturage for their cows. Eleanor and Edward wish for the marriage and for better pasturage. Pasturage meaning the fields or the grass that their grazing livestock feed on. In other words, Eleanor and Edward would like better farmland. Not dissimilarly to the Lady Lucas example from Pride and Prejudice with her concern for welfare and poultry, Jane Austen uses ZEUGMA here to jokingly link together the serious, so the welfare of Marianne and Colonel Brandon, and the comically domestic, better pasturage. But Sense and Sensibility in many ways is a deeply, darkly cynical book. And I wonder if there is some latent cynicism in Jane Austen's ZEUGMA here. Colonel Brandon, after all, is the master of the Delaford estate and their patron. He is the owner of Delaford Parsonage, the home of Eleanor and Edward Ferrars. Does Austen, or Austen's narrative voice, yoke the two together, so hoping for the marriage of her sister and their landlord, and the hope of better pasturage, grazing land for their cows, in order to suggest that they hope there might be a direct link between the two, that the former might lead to the latter, or at least that the first might encourage the last. Of course, Colonel Brandon is a good, moral man, but he might be more inclined to do even more even more than he otherwise might, to improve his lands if his wife's sister depends on that improvement. Does the text imply then that there might be a very selfish reason, along with other more generous-spirited reasons, for Eleanor and Edward Ferrars to hope for the marriage of Marianne and Colonel Brandon? I leave it to you to decide. In her use of ZEUGMA then, Jane Austen often yokes together the serious and the trivial in order to kind of joke about how we move through life and how we navigate the serious and the trivial. But although often and at first it's jokey, I do think that underneath the jokes is a desire in Austen's narrative voices to challenge the reader to think about how each part of an element of ZEUGMA relates to the other. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Remember, if you like what I do here on my channel where I analyse classic literature, then do subscribe. And if you have liked the video, then do please press the thumbs up button. It helps me out in YouTube's algorithm. Thank you to everybody who has and who continues to support my channel. I really do appreciate it. And what are your thoughts about the technique of ZEUGMA and the way that Jane Austen uses it? Do you have any of your own examples of Jane Austen's use of ZEUGMA? If so, leave them in the comments below.